The thing that has shown the light on this space more than anything is Instagram and TikTok, right? That's where all the creators are. That's the things that go viral. These are the things where anybody can hop on, make it pretty real, and it gets people's interest. I've been talking about this a lot recently because with the rise of the Instagram and TikTok points and miles creator, we've seen a complete outflow in the blog and writing space.
Welcome to Travel Stories with your hosts, Tom Kim and Trevor Mountcastle. This week, we welcome Richard Kerr of Bilt. Richard, you're a Navy veteran. I think I first knew you as the points jock. Maybe that's just an indication of how long we've known each other, but it's so great to have you.
Hey, man, it's great to see you chat, catch up. Hope we use some of this conversation really just to catch up and talk about the good old days. Yeah, man, the points jock. Long live the points jock.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we don't have Tom with us today. We're all feeling a little under the weather, and so we'll miss him on this. But we've got a lot of his questions, his kind of burning questions as well to kind of talk through, and really, really excited to have the conversation. So I thought we'd try to jump in, before we jump into kind of what I think most folks that have known you more recently, I'll say, you've been a staple of the Mile and Point community for, 15 years? No, probably longer than that.
Has it been that long? I think it's hard to believe it's been that long. Yeah, I think I went down the rabbit hole in 2010, and I haven't come out now 14 years later.
Yeah, I don't think I was that far behind you. I think my first Advantage card, my Marriott Envoy, before it was Envoy, was 2009.
SPG card, man. Rest in peace. Rest in peace, the Amex SPG, the good old days.
I missed that one.
Oh, yeah.
So before we go into the miles and points, the Bilt-related stuff, I wanted to just pull out of the history book, so to speak, one of the coolest stories that you've shared, and this is before I was even thinking about family travel. You had done this really cool trip, if I recall correctly, your son at the time, and you guys had gotten the chance to fly Etihad F. Before the apartments, before all that stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about that and sort of how you made that work? I realize it's not repeatable, but I think it's a really great story nonetheless.
Yeah, man. Let's see. My son was 6 months old. We were living in Japan when I was stationed in Tokyo. And as one does, as parents of newborns from time to time, you're up in the middle of the night. And what I used to do is we had a big old rocking chair, and I could hold him kind of in my left arm, and then I would just be cruising points and miles stuff, kind of with my right hand on the laptop. For whatever reason, that night, like 1 o'clock in the morning Japan time, I was on the Chase travel portal, just looking at routes, seeing what prices were. There were some interesting first products that flew into Tokyo, and I used to just kind of search and cruise and stuff. And for whatever reason, man, I have no idea. I searched Tokyo to the Maldives in first class, and a fare of $900 round trip on Etihad first class popped up on the Chase travel portal. And I went, that's really interesting. Let me book a couple of these and kind of see what happens. Booked it $1,800 round trip. The confirmation on the Chase page said first. The confirmation email I got from Etihad said business, but they were both the same Z fare class. So what apparently used to happen was different systems had Z fares for Etihad listed as different cabins. So I thought, $1,800 for round trip business class from Tokyo to Abu Dhabi. I had built a stopover in because they had the free stopover program they still have, where if you're flying first class, they'll book you a hotel and you get the chauffeur and everything in Abu Dhabi. But, I thought, hey, business class is pretty good. But, as one does here in the category that we operate in from time to time, we kind of push the boundaries. So I called up Chase and said, hey, guys, I got this confirmation. Look, your confirmation says first. The email from Etihad says business. I'd really like to do first. And to Chase's credit, and I've been a loyal customer now for, almost 10 years. And one reason because of this, like 3 days, they said, hey, let us take a look at this. We'll call you back. And I was like, yeah, sure. I'm never going to hear from these guys again. But I kid you not, man, like 3 days later, an email showed up from Chase that said, hey, look, there looks like some confusion here, but we've went ahead and taken care of the fare difference, and you and your wife are in first class. And like at the bottom of this had a little receipt with what I imagine was like the last four of the Chase corporate card. And they had paid the fare difference of like $9,000 each for us to be in Etihad first. And man, off we went. We flew the old Diamond first class on the A340 from Tokyo to Abu Dhabi, stayed there for a couple days in Jumeirah, a 5-star hotel that they picked up for the stopover program, did the chauffeur deal. I went all the way to Dubai, actually, and stayed at the Park Hyatt Dubai, and then flew to the Maldives, which, by the way, don't take a 6-month-old to the Maldives. Everybody kind of looked at us like, what in the world are these people doing? I remember dragging the stroller through the sand and having everybody be like, what in the world? But yeah, man, it worked out. And then Etihad had a triple miles promo for paid first at the time. So both my wife and I got like 150,000 Etihad miles that I used on American Airlines for many years after that to burn through all those back when you could do that. And it just ended up being one of those things because I would happen to be searching the internet at 1 a.m. I had the flying nanny for my son, like the London. Do they even do that anymore? Are there still nannies on board?
They weren't last time I flew, and that was October of last year. So, I mean, I think that I don't think those lasted past the pandemic, unfortunately.
I remember on their website, it was like they legit went to some London school for nannies, and they met us at the boarding door in their smock, and we kind of asked her, like,
oh, wow,
just let us know, like, what, and there she was like, anytime there was a mealtime, she came and she took Thomas, and like her and the flight crew like entertained him, and he was happy. And Emily and I sat there and had, a nice meal together, just with the divider down between the two middle seats. And then they took great care of him anytime that we needed. So, man, definitely probably still my best flight to this day, almost 10 years later. But, one of the many reasons I'm probably one of the luckiest guys in the entire world.
That's incredible. You hear of those kind of random data points. And I think we talked about something similar with Michael Traeger of TravelStories. But to know like two people with two pretty fantastic data points, one American Express and then one Chase, I mean, that's sort of got to be almost like lottery type stuff.
Oh, yeah. There's a few situations in my life where I've just used up all of my luck at once, I think, because I've been unlucky outside of these very specific kind of really big luck things. So I think I've won the lottery a couple of times.
Let's talk another way you kind of won the lottery. You bounced in and out sort of the miles and points community from a profession standpoint, or I suppose you bounced from out as a Navy vet into it and around, and you ended up finding yourself at Bilt. I find it is an interesting company. I haven't done all the research that a lot of other people have done. I was a slow adopter as you and I had gone back and forth texting. I think it was June of last year, in fact. I only finally got my card. But we followed your travels, you're in Dave Candy's travels, the partnerships that you guys have built. And it really seems like you guys take a different approach. Is there any insight that you can share from some of the conversations that you've had? You've been to Dubai, you've been to Istanbul, you've done some really cool kind of non-standard transfer partnerships or transfer bonuses, even with, I think, Hawaiian and Air France. How do you build those sorts of value propositions? Whatever you can share. I realize some of that's going to be a little protected.
No, man, look, it's been over 3 years now since we started Bilt, and I've been at the company, which is just really hard to believe. And it's just been fantastic. It's been an amazing roller coaster. It's been an unbelievable amount of work. We were just talking to pre-show about the travel. I here in a couple of days after recording, I start pretty much 4 consecutive weeks of travel to a lot of our partners in the destinations and cities you mentioned. But look, man, we started out from the beginning just wanting to do things a little different. And, even the company taking a bet on me over 3 years ago and bringing me on staff, knowing full well my background and who I was and the kinds of things that I like to do and may still do and don't do from time to time in order to keep sharpen my skills, and keep up with the latest strategies. But there's a reason that all of these programs want to work with us, and that is loyalty programs, for the large part, have a problem. And the problem is that their average age of their members is creeping up into the 50s in a lot of cases. So in another 10 years, when those traveling professionals, still active moms and dads, get a little bit older, they're going to have a problem. And the best way to reach the next generation, which was like a cliche thing before we came around, if everybody always wanted to know how do we reach the next generation, is Bilt. Our average age is about 30. It's an affluent group of people paying pretty high rent in the largest cities in the U.S. But these programs want to work with us because we're a gateway now into, our membership has thankfully ballooned to many millions of members across the U.S. So they want to get these people interested in their programs. And our pitch from the beginning is, look, this is not the standard. You can't throw what you've always done before. You can't do the same playbook. You've got to do something different to get these people and our members interested. And it's really a dream come true, man, where I got to go to a blank whiteboard many times, literally in the office with these partners and say, this is what I think would be awesome. What if we did 150% transfer bonuses? What if we did 100% transfer bonuses, but just for 24 hours? What if we did status matches, again, just for 24 hours? We've done all the way up to globalists for Hyatt. And if you like status, I think you're going to like some of the things that are coming up in the very short future. And just getting these people excited about, let's do something a little bit different. I think the biggest takeaway is Love my partners, but massive hotels and airlines are not always the most agile organizations. So when you come to them with something new, it tends to not be instantly something they're excited about or want to try. But if you luckily have to, well, I guess now we have, it was very difficult in the early beginning, but now we have lots of case studies and data that show the success that these promotions have. And it's thankfully gotten a lot easier. So, the short of it is, come in with a passion for what you're doing, come in with a solution for the problems that they have, which in our case is the age of members. And then you just got to develop the relationships that you can get somebody over there to take a bet on you.
That's a really interesting thing that I didn't think about. It makes total sense. I know that a lot of us sort of keep going back and asking you and your colleagues, hey, when are you going to be able to do mortgages? Because, that's the, phase of life we're in. But the reality is, I think you hitting on, renters, people that are in that approaching their prime earning period, you're getting in there before they've already built those other relationships, those other credit card preferences, so to speak. That's definitely an angle I honestly didn't think of. So I appreciate you sharing that. It definitely is an interesting value proposition.
Yeah, it's what's allowed us to get our foot in the door, especially 3 years ago, which, we signed up a lot of partners before we even existed. And that was based off of them willing to take a bet on us. And Dave Canty, who we have at the company, he's been running loyalty programs since 1994 when he started at Sheraton ITT, which was the precursor to SPG. And then he was on the team that helped create SPG. And then he started JetBlue TrueBlue, and then went ISG Rewards. So, having a guy like that in the pedigree of somebody who's created successful loyalty programs, go to partners that he's been working with for 20, 25 years and say, hey, take a bet on this new thing that I'm doing. Luckily, they had a lot of success. But I'll tell you now, the success we've had over the last 3 years, it was awesome to get our foot in the door, but we just continue to have new idea after new idea that's going to drive engagement into their programs. And more importantly, it's going to get our members excited. And it just continues to kind of be a win-win so far.
And now you've got that data to drive it.
Now we have case study after case study, right? Rent day comes every single month. Trust me, I'm on the hook to come up with something almost every single month. The good news is lots of data and case studies to say, hey, look, if you want to do one of these promotions with us, here's the success that you're going to see. And I'm thrilled to present it to them because I know how excited our members get about this and how many people are like, holy cow, 100% transfer bonus to Alaska Airlines. Are you kidding me? Like, we just wanted a transfer partner. Now you're throwing transfer bonuses at us. So it's awesome to be able to facilitate those wins and excitement for everybody.
That's awesome. So I want to jump a little bit around. So our listeners know that we put together some sort of notes and we often jump out of order. We do have TK on here, and so I'll throw something back to him in just a moment. But since you talked about sort of the promotions you've got to come up with for Rent Day and sort of how you build those value propositions, we had a really good conversation. Unfortunately, at recording, that other one hasn't posted yet, but we talked with Dia, who highlighted, I think, when you guys had rolled back Rent Day being 2x without, I don't know if it was 10,000 points. It was more than 1,000. I'll say it that way. And you had shared on another blog, I think, that only 2% had hit that. How do you use those metrics to figure out how you get the most bang for your buck? Because I think we all understand that a program either lives or dies based on sort of how you manage it and also how sort of I hate to say it, Dia, a mutual friend, of course, she likes to say, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. And obviously, there's a balance between how much people can push things before a program itself gets slaughtered, so to speak. And so, you've got case studies, you've got all these metrics. How do you sort of use those to inform you? And are there any interesting metrics that you can share that you've observed just from your time with Bilt?
Yeah, for sure. Specific one you're talking about is it used to be 10,000 point bonus for, double points on every single rent day. And we rolled that back to 1,000 points effective October 1st. So we announced it 2 rent days ago. So people who've taken advantage have had 2 additional rent days. And look, that comes from when you're a startup and you don't have any data, you got to kind of stick your finger in the air and take an educated guess, which we did for 2 years. And then once we had the data to say, hey, look, only 2% of cardholders have ever hit that limit. And that's not every single month. That's at any given time over 2 years, 2% have done that. And based on how many card members we have versus how many Bilt members we have, that means we were spending an extraordinary amount of money to fund 2x points or 4x or 6x points for 0.15% of the Bilt member base. And if I'm spending that much money, thinking the millions of dollars for 0.15% of our member base, I think any logical businessman or woman would agree, like, hey, some things need to change. So we decided to take that money instead of funding, double points for such a small percentage of Bilt members and say, hey, let's do 4 travel partners for rent day like we just did on September 1st. And that way we can have tens of thousands of Bilt members win instead of 0.15% of the member base. So that's the math of it. I absolutely understand that disproportionately affects probably the people that listen to this podcast and the people in my previous life of diehard Points and Miles world. And trust me, they certainly let me hear about it every single day across social media and DMs. That's just part of the gig now that I've had to accept, kind of coming from one world into the other. But look, it's just business, guys. And that doesn't mean, here's the thing about that is Points and Miles, diehard people, I love you. I am one of you. I will always be one of you. I still do a lot of fun things to make a lot of points and miles in my not so much spare time. But at the end of the day, it's a business. And that does not mean that we're still not going to be an incredibly rich program. It just means we are literally spreading the wealth elsewhere so that the vast majority of our members can win and not just diehard Points and Miles people. And I get it. That's not a message that diehard Points and Miles people want to hear. But we're still doing really cool stuff. Like I said, we just did 4 travel partners that were a part of Rent Day. We had 2 more transfer bonuses to Life Miles and Virgin. We had a Virgin Voyages deal. We had a Resort Pass deal. And we're going to continue to do more things that are awesome. We're going to continue to add transfer partners. We have 3 signed now that we're going to be launching this fall. We're going to continue to have, the amazing partners of Hyatt, United, Alaska, folks that, programs here in the U.S. that people love. So it doesn't mean that the program is quote unquote being devalued. It just literally means we're doing awesome things and letting as many people win as possible. But I hear the frustrations. So those are some of the metrics that we're looking at all the time. I'm looking at my other monitor right now. Look, I have 15 dashboards that monitor the health of our travel program at different, I look at it every single day, multiple times a day to make sure what we're doing makes sense for our members and makes sense for the bottom line. So a loyalty program, as I have learned over the last 3 years, is as much of an art as it is a science. And sometimes you mess up an art, or sometimes you take an educated guess in art and it just doesn't turn out the way that you want it to, and you've got to make course corrections.
So before I kick it over to TK, I just have a follow-up question. Clearly, you guys, if you've got 15 different metrics and you don't even run an airline, you've got a loyalty program that you don't have all the challenges, I guess, that I'd expect a airline to have. Actually, you probably have it easier. Way easier, if I had to guess. Do you get insight from the airline partners, airline loyalty partners, or the hotel partners that you chat with as far as how many metrics they track? Are they as advanced as you guys? Are they way far more advanced? I think we all talk about how IT is hard. A router goes down and suddenly Atlanta is a wasteland of people on the floor. Do you guys get that kind of insight? Are you guys way ahead of the game? Or is it really all that kind of complex? I'm thinking that thing from The Hangover where there's all those calculations in somebody's head.
Yeah. No, I think everybody's doing plenty of calculations. There's no doubt about that. And there are certain things that are way more complicated about airline loyalty programs because of all the different ways that they can realize revenue and costs. And man, it is an insanely complex world. On our side, I wouldn't say it's that much easier, right? We have over $2 billion of rent that we're processing every single month from, roughly, you call it 15 to 20,000 different landlords. Like the payment side of our business, which the Points and Miles world doesn't focus on very much. The Neighborhood Rewards platform now where, you can get Bilt points with any credit card that you have linked to the Bilt platform. If you dine at our dining restaurants, you take our fitness classes, you take a Lyft ride, now you shop at Walgreens, and a lot more partners coming. There's a lot to measure here every single day and look at. And then that's without even really touching the loyalty program. That's 15 different dashboards, each with probably between 5 and 20 metrics each, so just for the travel program that we look at. And that's not that's just me trying to get as much of an angle or as much of an understanding of member behavior as possible. But again, learning from the last 3 years, loyalty programs are insanely complex. The revenue, the flow of funds, the costs that you can realize, the costs that you can defer. It's been amazing to get to learn. And one of the things I've tried to do is impart as much of that knowledge onto creators and publishers as possible so that people can write smarter content or they can have perhaps a different view on how these things are written. I think you guys see, I engage with creators all the time. I know Points and Miles World gives us a lot of flack, but we host influencers and creators. And those trips are not, very specifically not, and you can ask anybody that's been on them, it is not, here's 48 hours of why Bilt is awesome. It is 48 hours of here's a peek under the hood of how our program works so that you can understand it, ask better questions, write smarter content, and really understand the business. Like there's no hashtags of Bilt Rewards when people go on these trips. There's no expectations of content. I wanted to start those, and we've done those 3 years ago, so that when I was in their shoes, I wish somebody would have said, hey, come take a look at the United program or the Chase program. Like this is the stuff that I wanted, not to whatever curry favor, like again, I completely understand the flack and the criticism you get when you're in this role and position now, but that's the honest truth of what we do at those things, because it's what I wanted when I was in the seat. So I'm happy to be an open book absolutely as much as possible to anybody that wants to understand how our program works.
And we love the insight. I know Tom and I chat about this stuff all the time. We're kind of geeks on this. And
we love to Monday morning quarterback all kinds of things.
Oh yeah, I did too, right?
Yep. So it's exciting to talk to somebody who's been on one side of the fence and now they've moved over, and just along kind of the same lines. I'm just really curious now that you've seen kind of like how the sausage is made. You've peeked behind the curtain. You kind of know a lot more about kind of the loyalty program side of things. What do we get wrong? Like, what are the miles and points people have misconceptions about? Like, is there something that you realize somewhat after the fact, like, hey, most of the people who attend these FTUs and are these miles and points enthusiasts, they don't get it. This is not the way it really is.
I don't know if it's so much that they don't get it versus just a mindset shift that I've had to be in. And again, this isn't faulting anybody that's a points and miles enthusiast. One of the reasons we've had success is we have a lot of people that have taken advantage of the program. It's just, we just cannot hand out tens of thousands of points at any given time, right? We can't have 100,000 point Bilt sign up bonus for the card. We can't have unlimited double points on everything. Like, it's a business, right? I'm never shy about saying I want to make this a win for everybody, including us. We have to make money. Like, I'm here working my tail off and on the road 50% of the time away from my family because I want to make money so that I can do what I want later in life and have freedom. I also want to do that so where it's going to be a win for the loyalty program partners and it's going to be a win for our members. And that means that we just cannot hand out cash, which is what points are, right? I mean, the flow of funds, just to really break it down for people who may have not thought about it or new listeners or new to the space, when you transfer a Bilt point to Alaska, for example, at the end of every month, Alaska sends me an invoice and says, hey, Richard, your members have transferred X number of Alaska miles over. Here is the agreed upon price that we negotiated in our contract. You have to cut me a check for X dollars based on number of miles transferred times price per mile. Cut the check. And that check for a lot of these partners now with millions of members and $2 billion of rent a month is a sizable check every single month. That means I've got to have income and revenue somewhere offsetting the cost of this really expensive but really awesome program we've built. That means that, yes, I can do awesome promotions. Yes, I can have amazing partners. But no, I cannot just have promotions with no caps. No, I cannot give you 60,000 points. Because you know what happens the second I give somebody 60,000 points? They want 70,000. Then they want 80,000. Then they want 90,000. Then God forbid you drop that sign-up bonus and everybody goes, Bilt's not worth anything anymore. Devaluing. Like, that's kind of like, that's the mindset shift that people just can't get over the hump of because they just want to take as many points as possible. And I'm not faulting that. I was there for a very long time. So it's not necessarily like people don't get it. It's just they're in it to win it, right? And we just cannot do that. That's, the main reason we've never done a sign-up bonus is because I am of a huge opinion that is a race to the bottom. What do we have to see with every other card now to get excited? Marriott has to do 150,000 point sign-up bonuses now. Now they got to do 5 free nights up to 50,000 certs that you can top up to 85,000. Now if Chase Sapphire Reserve never does 100,000 anymore, it's not worth talking about. They're only down to 50,000. It's just a race to the bottom, and it's a competition we don't want to play in. It's just something I'm not sure that the diehard people think about.
So talking a little bit differently, though, it seems almost like that Alaska award chart change, and I don't know if we're calling it a devaluation or an enhancement or what we're calling it.
Yeah, the magic PR words. Yep.
Yeah. My observation is Alaska is suddenly so much more useful to me because for 4,500 points, I can fly down to see my folks down in Florida. So, DC to Florida, a lot of other, fairly short trips are now, to me, it's like the new Avios. Did you guys see that as a value? Because just as you said, you can't give 50, 100,000 points away. Having Alaska as a partner, was that a selling point for you or not related at all?
I mean, I think we've all seen the value of Alaska miles for many years now. Like, I think I remember when you actually broke into tears when they overnight devalued the Emirates redemptions, right? That's one of my favorite,
He recounts it all the time.
Yeah.
That's a major recurring PTSD.
As it should be, right? Beyond that, from those times up until now, I think it's very easy to get a lot of value out of Alaska Miles. And when we're looking for partners, we want a partner where we know our members are going to be able to recognize value. In every program that we have, there's a way to recognize significant value. And then there's also a way for people just to fly the flight that they want, right? So I like to have both sides of it. If you want to be a maximizer, if you want to get value out of every single mile with art, you can do that with our partners, right? Turkish, great example of that. Hyatt, obviously, example of that. So the thing I love about the 4,500 miles with Alaska, right, is one of the benefits we have now with Bilt is if you pay your rent with the Alaska co-brand card, you get 3x Alaska miles per dollar of rent. If you're paying a $2,000, $2,500 rent, you now get a free flight every single month for paying your rent. Yeah, you got to pay the 3% fee, but that 3% fee is going to be a lot cheaper than whatever flight you were going to try and book for the most part, right? You're talking $75, $80, $90 every single month for a flight. Like, that's a great message. And that is something, talking to the vast majority of our members who are not like the three of us points and miles experts, that is a message they can understand. So again, going back to the novice people and just making a message they can understand, pay your rent, get a free flight every single month is an amazing message. And that's really why I like the 4,500 mile flights.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just looked like it fell into one of the sweet spots for Bilt. And I think I've actually transferred to Alaska, believe it or not. As crazy as that sounds, because I should have a ton of Alaska.
I absolutely took advantage of my own transfer bonus to Alaska. That's the best thing about every rent day is I get to take advantage of my own promos, and I absolutely do. And no, we don't have like unfettered access to Bilt points as employees. A lot of people ask me that because, again, there's a very real cost to Bilt points. So we have to earn our own Bilt points through spend and everything else, just like everybody does.
Wait, so you're saying you don't take some of your compensation in Bilt points like some people supposedly take their compensation in Bitcoin?
I do not, but they do take care of me in a lot of different ways that, I have absolutely no complaints there. Well, I think one of the things I can share is, if we are doing a business trip to an Istanbul or a Dubai or a London, which I just got back from in August, I can book my business class flights with Bilt points, right? Because I know the sweet spots where the cost of us transferring to Virgin Atlantic or Iberia or Turkish to book business class is going to be way cheaper than even buying a cash economy flight. So like, that's one of the amazing perks of the job for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. It's a far cry from having to fly economy for work.
Yeah, it doesn't suck. It doesn't suck. Hey, kind of along those lines, I had a question just because, having been in, miles and points for a while, all of us, I think we've seen things change. And, honestly, kind of the inflationary nature of mileage and loyalty programs themselves, that's nothing new. I mean, that's been the way it's been forever because there's always been, in some cases, too many miles chasing too few seats. But I feel like there's been an actual sea change. Like, I feel like there in recent months or in the last, ever since, kind of the return to travel after the pandemic, I think there's been a lot more interest. So there's been a lot more, I think, new people on the scene, people who are maybe either new to the hobby or just, are looking for those, maximizing those deals for free flights and things. And also, I think the big changes are the number of tools that are available to the average person that really are very helpful to kind of highlight, what's available. Those are things that seem to have changed, just in the last couple of years, both from, the technology side and this kind of like who's playing the game, right? And I was just curious what your thoughts are. Do you feel like we're kind of in a new era right now? I definitely feel like, I know from my perspective, doing my own searches for premium class travel and things like that, it seems to be a lot harder. The game has gotten definitely more difficult. Mainly because I think we've shone a light, I think, on more of the areas on what's available. People have more access to be able to find things where, maybe before it was a little bit more obfuscated or a little bit harder to find. And so you get fewer and fewer of the items that are out there that are kind of available for those people. I was just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think the thing that has shown the light on this space more than anything is Instagram and TikTok, right? That's where all the creators are. That's the things that go viral. These are the things where anybody can hop on, make it pretty real, and it gets people's interest. I've been talking about this a lot recently because I'm going to go on a little bit of tangent here, and I'll get back to your question, I promise. But with the rise of the Instagram and TikTok points and miles creator, we've seen a complete outflow in the blog and writing space. This is now to the point 3 years later where every single publisher that I know, right, think the NerdWallets, Credit Karmas, the Points Guy, Bankrates, they ask me every single week, hey, do you have any freelancers you can recommend? Like, there's nobody writing anymore because the next generation of folks 10 years later has come into Instagram and TikTok, and that's where they think they're going to make money off of referrals. That's where they think, I'm going to go viral and get brand deals. And I caution people who think that's the easy path because, yes, there are some great people out there creating amazing content. Very few of them are making a living from this. Whereas I'm telling everybody, listen, if you are a freelancer who is responsive, professional, and can write 3/4 of a decent article, you can make $500 or $600 an article right now freelancing for some of these outlets out there, but there's nobody doing it. I think all of us here know how hard it is to write a blog and to write and keep up with it. And people just aren't doing that. The other side of that, to get back to the original question, is that's what, in my opinion, has shown the light on this space and led to a currency inflation because brands are going to take advantage of that as well, right? The increased sign-up bonuses, the more points and miles in circulation, the increased prices to keep up with that flow, and then just the increased attention from social media into some of these programs. Now, that said, I don't think it's all doom and gloom. A couple of examples. I think if you know how to use and earn Aeroplan points, you can still have an amazing time and relatively easy success flying to Europe or Asia or South America in business class without trying too hard. The improvements that Flying Blue has made in their promo awards and the availability of these 55,000-mile business class tickets to Europe, like pretty much, like if you're a little bit flexible on your calendar, you can make it happen. The U.S. programs, probably not so much, just because of how much they're pumping into circulation with their credit card sign-up offers, which, I've already shared my opinions on that. So it's been really interesting. The tools on top of it, I don't know, man. We've integrated, we put Point.me in the app almost 2 years ago in the Bilt app. I see the number of people who use the tool. I also am very aware and, know the leaders of the other tools that are out there. There's so many of them. I think we're still in a weird spot for that. I like to think that people use these tools. My data just doesn't necessarily support that. I think it is still a bit of a niche thing to sit there. The three of us would think you're absolutely crazy if you're not using Point.me, or we have a Waze in our app as well to show you hotel award space, which I use for Hyatt availability literally every single day, like either for work or pleasure. Like it's an amazing tool. Point.me, right? Amazing. Like, why am I going to go search 12 different airline websites if I can just pop this up? C.Aero, Rome. Like there's so many different tools out there. I think it's still this, like, it's really hard to comprehend what you're...
It's still niche for the average person is what you're telling me.
Yeah, still niche.
Huh.
The average person is still not getting invested there.
It's amazing because I've shared some of those websites with friends and colleagues, and like you would think that it would just be like that. And still they gravitate back to, for example, Chase Travel. And I'm sort of like, but you're kind of missing sort of the point of the points. And for lack of a better way of saying it, it makes it easy.
I mean, look, we have the Bilt Travel Portal. You can redeem your points at 1.25 cents in the Bilt Travel Portal. Insanely popular redemption. Number 2 redemption of Bilt points, period, across the program is through the Bilt Travel Portal because people just go and search the flight they want. They go, oh, sweet, I can get this for free, or I can save $100 or I can save $150, and they're sold. Whereas, like, obviously, I'm like, please don't do it. Like, I'm looking at the data and I'm like, why didn't you just transfer to Turkish? Like, why didn't you just, like, and, I try and make it easy. We've done a ton of content with my, not so handsome face on YouTube and stuff, trying to convince people like this is how you get to value. It's just too hard, man. I get emails all the time from people or DMs that say, hey, I found these, business class flights for 200,000 United miles one way. Like, should I do that? Like, it is still niche, man. It's still not me. As much as I know, because we live in this world, we think that everybody knows what we know, but they just don't.
Our perspective is a little bit skewed.
Yeah.
So you said that 1.25 through the travel portal was your number 2. What's your number 1 redemption for Bilt?
Covering all or some of your rent is what people do.
Much more practical.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you're 27 living in New York City and you got the option of saving $50 on rent so you can go out to happy hour after work next week, people are going to do that. And the reason that people listening to this podcast should be happy about that is because that's how we afford our travel program. We have a very expensive travel program that has to be offset with lower redemptions. And people taking a win by saving money on their rent, not even that, but we have people writing all the time that are literally like, I had a limb fall on my car and I had a $200 insurance deductible. I used my Bilt points to save $200 on rent so I could like fix my car. Right? That's kind of the other side of people who are renting, who are playing this game, that if they save money from doing what they were going to do anyways, right? Because there's no fee to be a part of Bilt, then it's a win. And then that's a win for you and I because now we can transfer to Alaska.
And that's going to endear them to Bilt long term as well, because that was, especially for folks that are at that stage of life, they might not have that emergency fund to be able to tap into. So their Bilt points essentially become that emergency fund.
I mean, you talk about the data, right? We know how much the average American's in credit card debt. We know how much the average American doesn't save, right? So the ability to now save money, as much as I would love for them to save up Bilt points and take a dream trip that they would otherwise never be able to take, people are just going to go and save the money, right? So that's still the number one way that Bilt points are redeemed. And we look at that data every single day.
As we're talking award availability and everything. Let's set the Bilt hat aside. From your perspective, do you feel like we're back to 2019? Because it feels like, I think we can all agree, Asia is nowhere close from a capacity standpoint. I think Europe might have more capacity, South America probably not. But the way that people are more willing to pay for premium cabins, it makes me feel like it's not even just the chase for award flights, it's the chase for actually empty premium cabin seats. Is that your perception as a travel hacker?
Yeah. I mean, I think we've seen the interest in that just by the number of subscription services now that offer paid flight deals, right? There's, at least 7 or 8 companies I'm aware of that you can sign up for, and they just email you cash deals. So that interest has definitely increased. But man, I'll tell you, just in the last 3 to 4 months, like the cooling off of that has been very noticeable from what I've seen both in the day job and outside of the day job. I actually posted on my Instagram stories this morning. I was just sitting chilling, looking through my emails, and KLM had sent out an email that said, fare deals, and it's $1,500 nonstop. From Atlanta to Amsterdam.
I tried to replicate that about 5 minutes after you posted it, and I couldn't figure out dates that would work for me, unfortunately. But I totally jumped on it.
They're not sending out $1,500 business class fares unless, and that wasn't a mistake. That was like advertised fares across multiple months from the email that they sent advertising the sale. I think the cooling off effect in the global economy is here for real now. The revenge travel is done. People have spent all their cash. People are a little bit nervous. We're heading into the election season. We're deep into it now, 2 months away from the election. Nobody's really sure what's going to happen next year. And I hear it and I kind of see it in multi facets of life. And I think we're going to continue to see that where dollars can be saved the soonest. And I would argue that not paying for premium cabin airline tickets is one of the places where people can cut back the easiest. And I'm really curious to kind of see where we are in another 3 to 4 months with those fares, passenger yields, and capacity compared to today.
Well, I was just going to say, it's interesting comments you're making because, I know that was always something that I was kind of wondering about as far as how are the carriers protecting their cabins, because from a business plan perspective, it does seem like a lot of the major carriers really did see premium cabin as kind of their growth area, right? So it seemed like some of the generosity that they might have given to their loyalty programs to like kind of give upgrades, that was always being kind of continued to be, hacked away at over time. And, I felt like that was just kind of an industry trend. And you even saw, our ultra low cost carriers, saying, oh, well, we got to get more premium because that's where all the money is. And now that we're seeing kind of that cooling down, it's kind of interesting what the next iteration is going to be like. What are they going to do now?
Yeah, I'll tell you, my last couple of transatlantic flights, definitely some empty seats up there. I flew British Airways first class in August, Atlanta to London. There was 2 of us in first class and business class. Club World was only about half full. The flight home, kind of the same, maybe 4 of us in first class in Club World, a third empty. And again, just talking to the day job, some of the folks, like people are aware of this. Same on the hotel yield side. Like, hey, I'm asking some of the partner, how's the business looking into, future bookings, January, February, March. And there's not a lot of confidence out there in the market right now for where we're going to be.
But, they continue to keep the prices high, I think they've kind of made that deal, right? They said, we're okay having, empty cabins or empty hotels. We're just going to keep our fares high. So maybe our profits are still pretty good.
I tell you what, man, I cannot believe. So I'm obviously intimately familiar with the New York City hotel market. That's where Bilt's offices are. I commuted to the Points Guy offices in New York for 2 years before Bilt. So I've been commuting from Atlanta to New York for 5 years now. So I know what hotels cost. What I have seen in 2024 for hotel rates in New York City is just mind-boggling. Like, I cannot comprehend who these people are.
Who are paying for these
hotels, right? I've had to call in favors to the Hyatt GMs that I know from commuting for 5 years to say, hey man, can you cut me a break and get me something for under $500 a night? Can you cut me a break and can we get under 400 for what is like just a regular Tuesday in August? Like nothing going on. I just can't believe it. I've heard different rumors. Now this is taking the day job hat off and what I've heard, but I'm pretty confident that there are a lot of floors shut down in these hotels, and they are decreasing capacity, decreasing costs. You got to keep less housekeepers on staff, and they can keep rates high and still keep the same revenue without having to service all of those rooms. I am pretty sure that's what's going on. Otherwise, it just makes no sense.
Yeah, I think that's the new industry model, which is so weird. It's like it's about let's not try and get rid of all of our inventory. We're going to protect the inventory, and it's like we went from everybody being like Macy's and Sears, and now everybody's like Louis Vuitton. That's kind of how it's gone.
I mean, if I'm paying $500 a night for the Hyatt Grand Central, and I've probably lived 2 months of my life in the last 5 years of the Hyatt Grand Central, and every single time I'm on one of 2 floors, every single time I check in, like that like
That kind of tells you something.
like that, there's just no way. I'm actually a fan of that property. I owe a big favor from saving. My daughter lost her incredibly precious stuffed pig there earlier this summer, and the GM stepped in and ended up finding it at the laundry company. So I'm a big fan of that property, but I'm just saying, if there's only 2 floors I've ever stayed on after staying there for 2 months of my life, then I don't think they're all open.
Now, was that the one that used to be the Commodore Hotel long time ago?
What brand was it? It was the Grand Hyatt before COVID. Then
Grand Hyatt before. Okay.
Yeah. Then it became the Hyatt. It was supposed to be torn down, but I can't remember now. New York City law says they have to keep it open for employment purposes. So I'm not sure what the latest is going to happen to that place.
I think that one's known for being Donald Trump's first real estate development project back when he was in his like 20s or something, because it used to be a very decrepit, Commodore Hotel, right? That was near Grand Central Station. He developed it into a Hyatt property back in, I think, the 70s, I'm thinking. And it was kind of a big deal.
It's pretty old.
Yeah.
It is the only Hyatt in New York with a lounge.
Ah, well, that's good to know.
Yeah, only one with a lounge.
Interesting. So before we move off of points and miles, you sort of alluded to a little bit of predictions just in the next few months relative to kind of softening of the market. We always like to ask the question, you've been an observer and a participant for so many years, obviously a decade and a half. Any predictions that you sort of see as far as kind of where that bouncing ball is going?
I don't think it's going away anytime soon as far as loyalty programs or points and miles go. Like, if anybody's expecting a radical change, I really don't think it's going to happen. It's just too much revenue for these hotels and airlines and really anybody else that has a loyalty program that can produce a co-branded card. I would say the Credit Card Competition Act that we continue to say is going to go away, that's going to potentially cap interchange here in the United States. That continues to just not go away. It continues to hang around. It continues to kind of get more and more support. We've got folks in Washington keeping an eye on this, now for the day job. And there's some stuff in there that it just doesn't make sense for a lot of reasons. It goes back to the same, kind of thing from 2010 that said, hey, that we're going to cap, what debit card rewards are going to go away overnight. And it's going to produce a whole bunch of lower costs and free checking. Like it's almost impossible to find free checking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like I really don't think, even not putting the day job hat aside, it just doesn't seem to make sense, but it's not going away. So it's going to be interesting to continue to follow that for the next 6 months, depending on who wins the election in November, see what happens to that. But otherwise, I think it's going to continue to be a lot of what you're seeing today. I would say one big revelation over the last 3 years is the executives that run these programs, they are pretty much hopping from program to program. So like kind of once you make the inner circle of running a loyalty program, you're going to hop hotels, you're going to hop airlines, but it's a pretty close-knit type of executives that really tend to follow what the others are doing. And these corporate kind of cultures that I've been exposed to over the last 3 years, I don't really see them as rewarding innovation or rocking the boat or creating waves. I don't, to kind of put it lightly, I just don't see people being willing to break out of the mold and try something too drastic.
It's like all bankers, right? They're all conservative. Yeah. They don't want to take any risks.
Pretty conservative, which, when you look at the amount of money that they're running behind these programs now, like you tend to understand it. You tend to be a little empathetic for why they are conservative, because if you mess up that stream of revenue, you're potentially, doing things like bankrupting an airline.
Yeah. I mean, often the frequent flyer program is the reason that the airline posts any sort of profit at all.
Which, is why if the Credit Card Competition Act is passed as it is today, you're going to see airlines go bankrupt, right? The kind of thing I've said in my head is, and whenever the airline lobby starts to engage with this, I really need to be worried about it. I think we might almost be there. The airline lobby is pretty much undefeated in Washington, right?
I didn't even thought about that linkage, really, with some of these interchange fee regulations and things that they're talking about, they do have that big knock-on effect. Like, as you said, they really are going to affect general aviation in this country, probably.
Airlines versus Walmart. So shifting back to family travel and travel in general, I thought we'd close out the podcast with just a couple of family travel or travel topics. Again, going out of order, Tom had a really great observation. We had both really loved following your and your wife's Aman Resort experience. In my head, I didn't think Amans were in this hemisphere. upon further research, I know that I think there's one in New York, and obviously there's the Caribbean. But what could you say about that experience to kind of paint the picture for our listeners that might have missed some of your posts on Instagram?
Yeah. Look, Aman has been a bucket list item for me for at least 10 years since I read Lucky Over at 1 Mile at a Time. I think he did one in Cambodia.
Oh, same for me.
One in Cambodia many, many, many years ago. And I thought, one day I'm going to go in.
Sir, you don't need to sign any, but we know who you are. When you read that, you're just like, oh, wow, that's another level of restaurant.
Yeah, I knew how expensive it was, and I just kind of put it on a list of, hey, when there's a place in life where I have something to really celebrate and be happy and be thankful for, I'm going to go and do an Aman. It was my wife and I's 15th anniversary. Like I said, it's been an amazing roller coaster, doing points and miles from a hobby while in the Navy to now full time. Really an amazing job. And I thought now is the time to do it. But then I took a look at the prices and went, maybe not. So was really lucky. I'll give a little teaser here kind of to end on the story, but we're doing something really cool in Bilt Travel. We're reimagining the travel experience. And I will tell you in the next 2 months, we're going to come out with some really, really amazing things that I have taken inspiration from and being in the space for a long time about what I think the best way to book travel really looks like. And we're building it as we speak. And I'm really excited about this and a lot more to come in the next couple months. But through that project, I've met some incredible people and was luckily able to get some help at the Aman Resort. Now, still very expensive, but not the list price that you see online for that place. Still certainly paid a lot of money per night there. As soon as we landed in Turks and Caicos, this is Aman Yara. Never been to Turks and Caicos before. It is without a doubt the best beach, bar none, in the Caribbean. Absolutely lived up to reputation. I was afraid as soon as we landed and we were driving to the resort that I've built this up too much in my mind. It can't live up to expectations now. It's really been 10 years of me thinking about this. Like I've just built it up, so I just need to prepare myself for disappointment. But gents, it didn't disappoint. It really was that awesome from the time that you walk up and somehow they know who you are. Through the rest of the experience. It's an amazing property where I recently got into pickleball before we went there. As a new activity. We got some courts in the neighborhood. They had a pickleball pro on staff, and I kind of, they had open pickleball play the first morning, but it was a little too early. And it wasn't very high occupancy because it's July or June. It's really hot in the Caribbean. That's not peak season. That's off peak season for the Caribbean. So nobody else showed up, but the pro came up and he was like, well, let me see what you got. Let me get some lessons. Like an hour and a half later, after a private hour and a half lesson with this pro pickleball player, at some point during the pickleball thing, a cooler of beer and Gatorades had shown up with chilled towels. At some point during the pickleball game, like a photographer had come by and taken some awesome action shots. At some point in the pickleball game, a guy had come up and with a golf cart to make sure that it was there. And he parked it in the shade so that when I sat in the golf cart seat, it wasn't too hot. Yeah, it's just like you just continue to have, and then you go up and there's sunscreen and bug spray and umbrellas and a misting fan at this place. And it just goes on and on for we could do a whole episode about, that stay. And you just cruise around on bikes through there, private beach cabanas with your own kind of private beach carved out amongst the rocks. It's just amazing. And that's when you go, holy moly. First of all, let me take stock of what I've done in life to somehow be here doing these ridiculous things with my wife, and eating these foods and drinking this wine and sitting kind of watching this. The resort is on the northwest tip of the island. So you're just looking at the best sunsets I've ever seen. And I've, again, been so incredibly lucky to see some amazing sunsets. But if you ever get to do the Aman experience, there's actually New York City. There's one out by Jackson Hole. There's one in Dominican Republic. There's obviously Aman Yara and Turks and Caicos, and more under construction. That I would just wait until they cut a deal, which they do from time to time in off-peak season, or go to Japan right now while the yen is still high. You can actually do it for under $1,000 a night at the Amans in Japan. And that's kind of the price. That's really cheap for an Aman if you can do it for under $1,000 a night. You don't ever see that. But it just absolutely was incredible. And my wife and I still, if something really stressful since June's happened, we just have an inside running joke now of, hey, we should be at the Aman right now, right? Whenever something stressful is happening,
Yeah, I really appreciate the trip report. It was very eye opening, and it's interesting hearing about some other stuff. It's not a Park Hyatt, it's not a points and miles kind of place, and there's this whole other area that exists. That a lot of people have blinders or blind spots to, right? Because it's not a points redemption, right? But they are clearly valuable, avenues out there that people need to be open to, and that provide their own value and their own interesting experience.
They really do. I absolutely say it. So I completely get why people don't take a look at it. But there's Park Hyatts, and they're amazing. I have states that have incredible Park Hyatts in the world. There's just no comparison. There's just no comparison between an Aman and a Park Hyatt.
Another whole nother level of personalized service that you're just not even going to find in the world of Hyatt, unfortunately.
Yeah, but there's two types of accessibility about these things, right? Accessibility level one is understanding that it's available, right? And you sort of did that, right? By sharing that. Lucky did, but I mean, it's still very niche, right? If you ask the average person in some of these Mile and Point groups on Facebook or just randomly on Twitter, are they going to understand what the Aman experience is without referencing one of probably a small handful of blogs or Instagram stories or posts? That's kind of part one. And then part two, once you have the knowledge that it exists, then you sort of build up to, well, how do you make it a reality? Obviously, that's a lot harder unless you're on your way to Japan and have the ability to drop $1,000 a night. That does sound like an exceptional deal. Don't get me wrong.
Or a crap ton of Capital One venture miles. So either.
That's true. Very true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do also congratulate you for providing your public service announcement about the dangers of pickleball. You are not the only one who has had, of my friends that have had some recent pickleball injuries. So you stretch, people, stretch. Don't overdo yourself.
Yeah, unfortunately, back in June, just a couple months after picking it up, I was on the court, lunged for a ball, not particularly hard or anything, felt a kick. My son was watching the game, and I thought, how in the world did he get over here and kick me? I looked over at him, and he was still 15 yards away on the bench, and I went, oh boy, that's the kick they always talk about, and tore my calf muscle. So I was out of action for a couple months, but thankfully, actually, as of last week, back on the courts again, and man, I just love it. So
nice.
Really try and take it easy, and fingers crossed that I've done everything. But I tell you, my stretch routine is quadrupled since June. So really trying to avoid any more injuries.
You make some big sacrifices for your sport, huh?
Yeah.
This whole getting old thing, stretching is so much more important. Like I never realized how important stretching was until I think I turned like 38 or 40.
Oh man, yeah, I turned 38 last month, and I'll tell you, like the amount of stretching that I'm just going to continue to do, just because spending the summer with a bum leg and having to travel on is just miserable. So I don't plan on doing that anytime soon.
No, yeah. Those stretches are so impactful now, unfortunately. Yeah, that and ibuprofen. Anyway, so wanted to try to cover a couple of final topics if we have the time. The first one, and I can't remember when you did this trip. I think it was last year, but it might have been earlier this year. You were probably doing it kind of dovetailing with a work trip. You had your family fly out. I remember you went to Salzburg and kind of did this really fun kind of European experience. And I was wondering if you could just share with us, I guess part one is sort of how did you sort of, lay that out? And then part two, I think you're pretty open, and I know Emily is really open about the homeschooling and sort of how you guys layer that in. And I asked because we also talked about this topic with Nick Reyes at the beginning of the summer, and he's looking, and they were trying to do that over the summer. We hope to get him back on to sort of see how it went. But that's an area that I know I personally am very interested in as my daughter gets older, and it just seems like both a great opportunity and a challenge.
Yeah, that's exactly, the right way to describe it. So the Salzburg trip was actually for the 10th wedding anniversary, all the way back in 2019 for my wife and I. We redeemed some airplane points on Lufthansa, and we flew the A350 over to Munich, spent a few days in Munich. That Anda is there in Munich, by the way, not exactly in the middle of the city, but a super easy train ride into the middle. It was awesome. Then we took the train over to Salzburg, and then we trained further over to Vienna and flew home from Vienna. And that was an amazing week doing all of that. Dude, the homeschooling thing, it has been exactly as you described, a challenge and a blessing. First of all, you just have to have a partner that is the most patient person in the world, which I luckily do with Emily. There's no way I could teach my kids at home every day. I have no idea how she does it. Like, it's just like to teach kids from the time that they can't read, write, spell, do anything, all the way to where my kids are now, after she's been teaching them really since COVID started and they closed the private preschool that we're doing. We decided, like, hey, let's take this opportunity. Let's see if it's going to work. Let's see if Emily can, make this happen. Let's see what it's going to be like. And then the positives, for us specifically, have just been amazing. So luckily, Emily loves it. She takes great pride. I mean, there's nothing that makes her beam more with pride than when somebody ever compliments her on the kids. now being excellent readers and writers and doing math and stuff, because she's taught them literally everything that they know downstairs in our, kind of, we call it the playroom. She loves it. And the upside of that is, we're not beholden to a school calendar, and the kids travel with me all the time. We do trips where Emily stays home and I take the kids. We do family trips all the time. The last 2 years, we've gone to Europe in off season both times, which is what I will continue to do. Off season Europe is absolutely the best. It's been end of February, beginning of March, the last 2 years. We have an RV, and we do long extended RV trips where the kids do homeschool, and I have a little office in the back of the RV. That's their bedroom at night, and during the day, it's my office. And watching my kids experience the world in a way that so few kids get to do, and just listening to them recount their trips, listening to the things that they pick up. The first time you go and fly international through a kid's eyes and you just listen to the things that's important to them, that they pick up on, all these things that sound cliche and stereotypical, they're just amazing, to where like my kids, they're just a little bit different, and everybody's kids are going to be a little bit different to you. They're your kids. They're a little bit special, but just, like watching my son, who they both play sports, but watching my son specifically stand amongst his baseball team, he just has an air of confidence about him that most 9-year-olds don't have. And it's not arrogance, and it's not, I'm better than anybody. It's just like, I've kind of seen the world over the last 4 or 5 years since I've been old enough to remember. And I get on airplanes all the time, and I go through airports, and I talk to adults, and I just kind of like, I'm not just like a little numbskull kind of running around like trying to hit another kid with a bat. It's like, it's just kind of a deal. And I'm super proud of them. And I like to think that the experiences that they have been a part of that. They've gone to New York with me twice this year for 2 weeks at a time. Their homeschool when we're in New York is like, okay, you guys have ridden the subway enough now, where last trip it was, here's where we need to go. You guys tell us where to go. You're in charge of navigating today. Like, we're going to go down to the subway platform. You're going to tell us which gate to go in, which platform to get on, which train to take. And like, mom and dad aren't going to help you. Like, you got to figure this stuff out. And just doing that kind of stuff, man, is just so amazing. But again,
so empowering, because, they understand how the world works a little bit better. And then, when things don't quite go their way, or things are a little bit more complicated, you're right. They can kind of go through life and not be as kind of traumatized or whatever, because they know, hey, it's going to work out. I just have to do this or I have to do that. And
especially when the inevitable delays and cancellations hit.
Exactly.
Right.
You got to figure it out. Yeah. Which was actually summer travel. This summer, I don't know, guys, maybe you guys, was this summer's flight and airport experience was miserable. Every flight was delayed. The number of cancellations and delays and lengths of delays this summer for me were just unbelievable.
Well, I think the amount of external factors, between CrowdStrike and tropical storm this and tropical storm that, and then I just feel like there just felt like a much higher level of outside factors that was kind of conspiring toward your summer vacation having at least some extra stress and some extra adversity.
I literally quit commuting to Newark in August because I couldn't handle, especially going in and out of Newark. So I live in Atlanta, but I don't fly Delta. So I'm a United guy, but like I couldn't do anymore because it was just an absolute dumpster fire every single time. And the stress just got too much where I was like, I'm not dealing with it, because it was the same with, when Emily and the kids flew up back in July for 2 weeks, they were delayed for 6 hours flying JetBlue from Atlanta to LaGuardia. And they had to, you got to sit in the Atlanta airport for 6 hours. And like,
maybe that was my problem. I've never flown so much United this summer than this summer for some reason. It's just, for whatever reason, it was just working out. I need to go to Newark, or I needed to go here, that United flew or whatever. And, and I'm not a United flyer by and large usually, but strangely enough, I just flew a lot of United.
I don't think it was limited to United. I was on the sidelines for a lot of it. Other than like a work trip or two, I was able to just stay home from like July 1st until like the second to last week of August, which I was very happy for. I was feeling it for all of you guys, but it was sort of like I could see the writing on the wall after how last summer went. It was just not going to get better.
Yeah, this next administration has to do something. The airports are overscheduled. The infrastructure is a complete mess. They cannot support these schedules, but they continue to sell tickets knowing full well that the ability to operate the summer schedule is just not going to happen. And I don't think that's right. I think they really need to do something about this.
And the IT is antiquated.
Oh man, there's been 2 radar failures in the last week that have closed Newark for multiple hours at a time because it's just the infrastructure is broken, right? And like, you can't have a New York airport down. Like, it's unbelievable.
So, Richard, I had a question, and again, I think our listeners really like the, kind of some of the experience that you have and kind of the view or the vision that you have, looking at so many different aspects of the travel industry. Are there any other areas that you're seeing where, people should, not count out in terms of, where they can maybe find some value or some outsized redemption type of capabilities. Things like the Aman, things where, there's value, but, maybe you pay money for it or something like that. Do you have any thoughts for our public or our listeners?
Yeah. Value's in the eye of the beholder, right? Because where I have found the most value this year has been low-cost carriers. I had to fly to Vegas round trip back about a month ago, and I flew Spirit big front seat round trip from Atlanta for like $250 all in round trip on the big front seat. And it was the smoothest, most on time, most convenient, most least stressful flights I've had this year was on Spirit in the big front seat. It was awesome with their new internet.
I agree with you about the low-cost carriers because, I've had far more easy experiences on Spirit than I've had on Delta or United or a lot of the other big three.
Yeah, I mean, it's just been amazing. Now, Frontier, I did do the status match, continue when it comes to family travel, like getting the entire family in the first 3 rows of Frontier. Maybe not the first 2 anymore with the middle block seat, but row 3 is still the extra leg room in all 3 seats. Getting the family on that with all the check bags and everything included, refundability, unbelievable value. Now, I've had some pretty rough Frontier delays this year, like some really rough Frontier delays, but when it goes well, it's the best value that there is kind of in flying. And I really hope that they continue to do those status matches. That I don't remember what I paid. Like $199 or something.
It's worth it.
Oh, well worth it. So worth it.
I've actually had them honor a flat tire rule situation where I got to the airport late and they actually did put me on the next flight with no charge. And more recently, they did schedule change on one of my flights and I needed to change it. They actually refunded my entire ticket, which I was like, oh, you're not going to make me go through a whole bunch of hoops and, you're only going to give me like 10 cents of the fare that actually it is because, the rest are all taxes and fees. So I was just shocked at kind of how how well I've been treated on Frontier and Spirit. So I think that's a great idea that don't knock the ultra low cost carriers because there's some value there and they're hurting, they want customers. So I think they're clearly trying to court you and your business.
I think so. I mean, one of my favorite travels from this summer, I had a misconnect in Houston from United because of thunderstorms. United couldn't pull off the recovery flight. Actually kept us heading for 4 hours. We taxied all the way to the apron of the runway after misconnecting the 4-hour delay, and the pilot comes on and says, "Oh, we timed out." And I'm like, "You didn't know that before we left the gate, like my man?" Like, I literally got off the plane. I took the train in Houston over to the Frontier concourse. I ran up to the gate for the Atlanta flight. They had already shut down the computers, and I was like, "Can I please buy a ticket to this Frontier flight from Houston?" It's like after midnight by this point, the typical Frontier schedule. And I was like, "Can I buy a ticket? I want to get home tonight." Like, it's been a really long week. The station manager came, reopened the flight on the computer, sold me a ticket right there at the boarding gate, swiped my credit card, and I got on the flight. And I was like, nobody else was going to do that. No other airline was going to reopen the flight to sell me a ticket, and they did.
Oh, you would not get that from American.
No, so they did that, and I got home at like 3:30 in the morning. But at least like by that point, there weren't even any hotels left in Houston that night because of the storms and the cancellations. And I was like, Frontier did that for me. Like, it was awesome,
and that's going to stay with you, and that's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Hey, so really appreciate you coming on, and you're welcome anytime you wanna come back on. Love the insight that you were able to share. Really. Always appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, wonderful discussions.
I just have to give you one shout out. And it's funny because every so often I'll go to my Twitter page and I still have that pinned post of the photo of you and I co-hosting the First Frequent Traveler Toys for Tots. We do hope to do that again this year. Obviously, Ed and Gene have stepped in your stead, filling your shoes and probably more than filling your shoes, candidly. No offense.
No, man, I get it. Ed does plenty of stuff in this. A lot of folks, Gene's as well.
Yeah. Just appreciate your partnership in the events that we have co-hosted in the past. And maybe we can convince you to join us either late November or early December when we do the Holiday Toys for Tots this year.
Well, let's get it on the calendar now, man. That's always the best shot. No, that was awesome. That's my last duty station was in Quantico where I lived, and drove up to DC for a night of donating toys for Tots from a lot of Points and Miles people. I thought it was awesome, man. That's one of just so many memories that not only the amazing trips, but like the friendships that carry on 10 years later, 14 years later, in some cases, of being in this space and seeing a lot of people just wish me well, as we've embarked on this journey kind of on the new side of this community. So to everybody who's followed my story or followed me or wished me well or was supporters when I was in the Facebook days or at the Points Guy and read my stuff, like, I really appreciate it. And it's just led to this kind of a dream job that I've somehow landed in. So I appreciate everybody who's supported me.
Well, can't wait to see what you continue to do at Bilt.
Man, it's going to be a really exciting fall, so everybody hang around.
Thanks so much, Richard.
All right, you guys, see you later.
With that, we'll close out the show. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed listening.
If you've enjoyed this episode, consider becoming a Milenomics Patreon member and get access to even more miles, points, and travel content.